New ones. I was just curious, anybody here from the last time I did a clinic here? Okay. There's been a lot of action in the last couple of years, and basically I've been able to get to a point where I have substantially completed what I would call getting everything on the layout that's on the Conrail portion of the layout as presentable. So the layout is primarily a Conrail layout. There's a D&H component to it, as well as a couple of short lines. And it's only the Pocono Northeast short line and the TMSL short line that remains to be done. So last time I was here, I showed this slide, which is my hand-scrawled track plan that was done for this area here, which is the addition that I put onto my house, connecting the old workshop and the house itself. Now, things have changed since then. We actually have a much more impressive track plan that was done as a joint effort between myself and a friend of mine, Brooks Bentz, and Otto Vondrack from Railroad Model Craftsman. Brooks had done an article on my friend Mike Confalone's layout, and after that came out, I thought he had done a nice job with it, and he approached me about doing an article on my layout for RMC. He pitched Otto on it, and Otto said, why don't we do it for the Conrail 50th anniversary issue, which is, I think, in stores now, and some people might have gotten it and seen it already. I haven't even gotten my copies of it yet. And most importantly, I realized that I could get a track plan out of it, which has been the single thing that people ask me for the most. and people have been asking me for a very long time for a track plan. But you can see why it might not be a 5-minute job to do a track plan of my layout. When you model a spaghetti bowl, you end up with a spaghetti bowl. But this was the original layout. In fact, this portion of it was 37 years ago when I built the house. The whole layout occupied just this stage. And then, this portion here was added on. And then when I built the addition, which is all of this area, everything that was in here got moved out to here. So been a little bit of work here over the past decade or so. We're going to be talking a lot about what goes on in this room, because this is kind of what remained for me to pronounce the Conrail portion of the layout essentially complete. And with the layout photos due during January, I realized, well, I've got a few months to do this, so how hard can it be? So this is the room. This is the former oil tank room. I used to have 2 oil tanks in there, and when we did the addition, the oil tanks got moved to a completely different spot. New oil line ran, and I reserved this room as a future area to be modeled. Now you notice there's a tunnel portal here. This is actually the main line coming out of staging, and it goes in and takes a right-hand turn through my foundation. Drilled about 18 2-inch holes through the foundation wall to get from this room into the main basement. For anybody so inclined, on my YouTube channel, there's a video of me having no fun at all drilling one of the holes, just so you can see what went into it. I eventually had to call my contractor, who also had a hard time doing it, and he finished it off because I had to tap out. But this is the room. It's only 9 by 9, and what I had planned for this room was to model the Crestwood Industrial Park. You'll also see a little bit of track up here and some foam screening it out. This track actually gets to an area over here in my model shop that is a track used by the TMSL, which is the Towanda Monroe Shippers Lifeline. that operates an SW1 and carries a grain hopper or two from Towanda Yard all the way down to Monroe. Goes through a lot of nothing and ends up at a grain mill to be built at some point in the future here. But it goes behind all of this, basically around the edges of the room. You don't really see it when you're standing in the room. So I had in my mind 3 different consignees for this area. Foster Wheeler was a very interesting customer to me. They predate Morrison Knudsen, if anybody's familiar with their facility. Basically, they took over the old Foster Wheeler facility. Very interesting track work and products coming in and out, nothing like it on the layout. So I definitely wanted to incorporate that. So here I'm starting to put up the bench work for it. My buddy Dave had tried to talk me out of doing 3 consignees here because he thought it might end up being too crowded. But I prevailed, and I'll talk about how and why as we go along here. But you can see how Foster Wheeler's site is right adjacent to the main line here. And off to the right, across my movable gate bridge, and go into staging under Pittston Yard. So now, most of the bench work is in place. And I was trying to leave enough people room here so that you can operate without difficulty. It's usually 1 person at a time in there, so really it has not been a problem. Here's some Homosote on top of plywood for my track base. I don't use that everywhere, but when I'm doing a big industrial area and I'm not positive of where all the tracks are going to be without playing with the arrangement, I like to use it. And here's my mock-up. So the idea of using mock-ups is I tend to be very visual in how I think and how I plan things. And if I can't get it in my head, I can't build it. Once I have it in my head, I just move right along and build it. So I did several iterations of using cardboard to mock up the building and just get a feel for the size of it and how I could lay tracks around it and get everything that I wanted in there. On this side of the building, this is basically materials in. They would get steel in here, big door, overhead crane, which you'll see later. I never did figure out exactly what this portion was used for, but it was there, so I modeled it. And the track arrangement was based on Conrail's ETS diagrams. I like to use cardboard for mock-ups because it's basically no cost. And to make them accurate, I usually cut the cardboard on my table saw. Gives me a nice clean cut and reproducible measurements for the different sides. This is the building that I was trying to represent. And this is one of the better photos I found. It was very, very difficult to find photos of this during Foster Wheeler days. This is probably an aerial from the 50s at some point when it was being built. I modeled the building to scale width-wise because you can't get all of the doors that you need and the tracks going into the building if you shrink it. And I modeled the building about half length. So this is a more familiar site for anybody who's seen the Morrison Knudsen photos. This is where they would be delivering the recently remanufactured locomotives, and you can see how I've drawn in and cut out some of the openings already. Here's your more familiar shots. This is probably from a Sam Scanella article in one of the Railroad magazines. He was kind enough to share some of his photos with me. So I decided to build this one with a wood core, which for reasons which I'll get to in a little bit. It's a big building, and I wanted to be able to apply siding to it. And if I tried to build this all out of plastic, it would have cost a fortune, and it really would have required a ton of interior bracing, and even still I couldn't guarantee that it wouldn't be wavy when I was done for building that size. So I used high quality plywood. I used some vertical grain fir that I ripped to make all of the interior reinforcements. Everything was glued together with canopy glue. I used about 2 bottles of canopy glue on this. I wanted the roof to be removable. Why did I want that? Because there's tracks inside. So rather than have to reach through a mouse hole to get to something that might have had difficulty or a clean track or whatever, I just wanted the roof to be able to be removed. So what you can see here are these are the roof beams for the ends of the building. And this is what I'm about to cut out for the intermediate beams. So you cut out these 2 notches so that it fits down over the reinforcements on the top. And of course, that's the same bevel as you see up here. So there they are in place. Next thing I did was glue the roof to the beams using every bit of weight I could find. And I started looking at the ancillary portions of the building, and the more you look at the photos, the more you see different things that you hadn't seen in other photos. As I'm posting pictures of the construction in progress on my group, photos began to materialize. Guys would send me a photo and say, hey, you need to do this, and they send me a picture, which is good, as long as they don't arrive too late. So now the building's really taking shape. I'm still playing with my track arrangements, but it's starting to look like what I wanted it to look like. Next thing I did was seal the entire structure inside and out. Again, not wanting any warping or twisting. So that took a minute because that's it's a big building, and especially doing the inside was a real thing. But I think it was worth it. Now I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do my siding, because the look of this building, based on the pictures that I've seen, was the key to capturing the personality of it. And I was, right now you can see that I've got in place some evergreen scribe siding, and I'm trying to picture what the verticals are going to look like. I'm also trying to figure out how the heck I'm going to get the leaf lines, because the siding itself is too thick to simply overlap like shingles. So what I ended up doing was taking the siding and just laying a thin strip of styrene on one edge. And that's what's going to give me my relief. So really, the pieces are just butted up against one another, but the little strip added underneath the bottom of each strip gives me the relief that I'm looking for. That makes sense?
Yep.
A couple of clamps involved here. All of these plastic siding pieces were bonded to the wood structure with canopy glue. I don't know where I'd be without that stuff. It just works with everything. It's fabulous. So here's the basic structure now, starting to take hold, ready for paint actually. I chose to model it based on the colorations in the UK days because I thought it was more interesting. Now, you'll notice that in this particular photo, this part's green, but this part isn't. But in some other photos, this part is. So sometimes you use a little bit of license and you just kind of wing it and do it the way you think looks best, and that's basically what I did. One of the salient features of this were the boarded up windows. I guess at one time during when it was first built, that's what provided some ambient light for daytime purposes in the building, but those got boarded up probably for heat reasons. So I had a buddy of mine actually laser cut these for me, so I wouldn't have to, because there's a lot of them. I didn't want to make all of those. And there's the green strip down on the track side. I got one picture in that showed me that in addition to this, which I already built, it actually had this little thing here, so I added that on afterwards. So the panel lines, there was no way I was going to do that out of individual panels, and even if I had, you probably wouldn't have noticed the lines. So what I ended up doing was, I got a fine, very fine angled cosmetics brush, and hand pastels, and a template, hand drew in all of those lines with pan pastels. That wasn't the most fun I ever had. And I did not do it all in one fell swoop, because I would do it for maybe an hour and then I had to walk away. It was a lot. But it ended up being an effective way to do it. These are the laser cut panels that my buddy Scott Mason cut for me. That's about how many I needed, believe it or not. As I've been getting, as photos begin to come in, I realized I needed, ladder cages. So I built one of those up out of the usual Walther's etchings. And then another picture revealed a blasting booth that was attached to the place. So I had to basically scratch build that. These little ducts, I think, were 3D printed parts that I bought off eBay and kind of modified them in the suit. That's what it looks like. Same thing for the truck dock. This whole assembly, believe it or not, is a 3D printed item that I got off eBay, incredibly reasonably priced. So I was so impressed with it, I ordered a dozen more from the guy. But at this point, other than needing some planting, the building is really starting to look finished. Inside the building, the so-called concrete is done with styrene sheet. And I used some pre-mixed grout, believe it or not, to do the interior track portions. This is a good view showing how the boarded up windows relate, the vents that have been added. Pretty much the whole thing's ready to be put on the layout at this point. A lot easier to do weathering off layout, because this whole long side is against the track and hard to get to after the fact. So I realized I needed to get some additional land. In earlier photos, as you'll see, I think in the next one, this whole portion of land wasn't there, and I had no place for the crane yard. So I decided to add on some additional stuff, and when you're gluing fascia in place, I don't know how you do it, but that's how I did it. It's not easy to get it in to stay in place just with simple clamping sometimes. And I wanted a smooth fascia. I didn't want to use screws and have to patch the holes later. So this worked out okay because of the bench work on the other side. Even more. This is to the left of the plan. And I decided to make a little more area with foam wherever I could sneak it. The Power Grab Ultimate was perfect for both gluing the fascia in place and gluing the foam to the benchwork. So here's the piece that I added on. I think you can tell it was repurposed from something else that I cut out. And here you can see my swing gate. So it's positioned in such a way that my swing gate folds right back into this spot. So it's really the biggest amount that I could scab on there. I discovered after the fact that I needed to angle this portion of the for opening the swing gate. Originally it was just like that. It didn't quite make it. The crane yard, I think, is what makes this end of the plant look right. Without it, I don't think it would have made the scene. Here's a picture of how the gate works in there. So here's the gate. This portion of it is at staging level. This portion of it is at layout level. This is the plant at Ransom down here, and here you're entering the north side of Pittston Yard. So I did some rudimentary scenicking for the top level of the gate bridge, and this down here is just a little bit of landscaping. But you can see how it folds right back into that notch there, and this is how power gets to it. Gary's taking notes here. I wanted some rounded corners, so I used my bandsaw to cut out some foam to match the foam soda on top. And I assembled the Walther's overhead crane beds and pronounced them way too wimpy for the overhead bridge crane, which is really designed to be used inside one or more of their buildings. So I ditched those and made up my own out of Central Valley and micro-engineering parts. Made up a little jig so I could make them consistent. And I used some micro-engineering girders on top. And I kind of based this on the look of the one in, I think it's the Bethlehem engine terminal. Added the usual brass origami to it, give it a little bit more of a look. And there it is in place. Much later, there's a story that was in, I think, one of my last columns in Model Railroad Hobbyist about this building down here. This is the X-ray shed. I had built it out of a cardboard mock-up, and then as I was finishing up all of the scenes in Crestwood here, I decided to build it right out of styrene. And I had visited the site back in June, so I had some pictures. It's still there. The concrete portion of it is still there. So I was able to take some pictures that I took and some other pictures that were historical, built it up out of styrene, put it in place, put some pictures on my group. And the next day, one of my friends sent me pictures of it with the top portion of it. He says, "Mike," he says, "it's missing the whole top." So I looked at that and I thought, of course, that's what I mean about the timing of photos. It was already in place, it was ground covered in place, and I said, you know what, I'm just gonna build the top precisely, and stick it right on top after the fact, and that's what I did. But I was glad to see the pictures, because frankly, it looked kind of stupid without the top. Certainty was the next building on my list. This one kind of drove me crazy for a while, because after I had done Foster Wheeler, I was looking at the spot where I was going to do Certainty, and just didn't look big enough. And my buddy Dave chose those moments to kind of give me the whole "I told you so" thing. But I said, there's always a way to do it. You just got to think about how you're going to solve that problem. I included this picture because all of this here was what made me decide I got to model this place. Loved the silo, whatever the heck this thing is, we're getting to that. Unloading shed, all of this kind of thing. Plus I like the traffic. It's roofing granules going into the plant, and they shipped finished shingles out in boxcars. So it would have been, it's a nice consignee. So I thought about it, started making some mock-ups. So what I realized at one point was that I was building a Certainty plant, not the Certainty plant, because the footprint that I had to work with didn't really resemble what I saw in Crestwood. Their plant is just linear, just a big, long site. But mine had to bend, and I had to figure out how I was going to get the plant to bend to fit my spot and look right. And I looked at a lot of other Certainty plants on the internet. No two of them were alike. They all had a certain kind of feel to them, a certain color scheme. And then I chose to model one that fit the site and looked right there. So at this point, I've got the footprint pretty well established. And as you can see, here's basically my shipping module down here, and the plant is two different modules with an angled bend to it. This is not the final location of the tower. It's actually going to be in this area. So I chose to do this one the same way, standard wood construction. Actually, the last three large structures I've built have all been this way because it really lends itself to building it in the workshop. And these are the basic modules now in place. The cardboard silo is in the correct place. The big blue water tank is the signature element of the site that I wanted to make sure that I included. These are more of those 3D printed dock door and plates. I mean, and these doors actually go up and down. So I mean, so the whole thing comes apart so that you can paint them different colors and then just slide them together and glue them in place. They're the best ones that I've seen. There was also on the prototype a door, a big door with a ramp up to it. So I wanted to make sure I incorporated that. And I thought, how am I going to join these buildings together without making it one big giant thing? And I don't know why I thought of it, but I decided to use rare earth magnets. So literally the buildings are rigidly held together by the magnet, but if you need to take them apart, it's effortless. This was the first joining, big moment. A very satisfying sentence. So the silo, of course, screamed styrene, so I used good thickness styrene to do this, probably 1/8. And I tend to build things like this right on the bed of my table saw up against the fence, which gives me a very easy, nice flat level surface, and I can use magnets to hold things in place, and the 1, 2, 3 blocks, the whole thing's up against the fence, so it's really a good way to get nice square construction. Nobody has enough clamps. That's basically using them all. Then I did styrene overlays to match the prototype look, made a cap for it. And then it was time for some brass origami again. This is I think this is all Walther's etchings that were modified and soldered together. I would solder them rather than try to use CA, because once you solder it, it's there. And they're very easy to solder. So this walkway, oops, wait a minute. This walkway here goes from an opening in the silo into the main plant building. I hadn't seen that originally, but then when you start looking at different views in Google Earth, you start to see things that you realize you need to incorporate. This little platform and stairway is on the prototype, and nobody can explain to me why it's like that, but it looks cool. This is a 3D printed elevator head from Stephen Tully, Steel Mill Modular Supply, probably familiar with it. It came with these railings, but the whole thing kind of warped, and even though he told me to heat it up and just bend it, I did, but it didn't want to stay straight. So I took the 3D printed railings off and used some brass, soldered together, and that keeps it nice and flat. But the head here is very nicely detailed, and because the silo is right up front when you're standing there, and almost at eye level, I wanted something that looked really, really good to the eye, instead of the usual, much plainer Walters or Ricks ones. So here's the leg in place, and you notice that that it doesn't go all the way down to the bottom, as of course it would and should. That's because this portion down is inside the unloading shed, and you never see it. It's really on the back side of it.
Mike, yeah, it's 1:30. You said let you know when it's 1:30.
Perfect, thank you. So at this point, you can see that I've added brass railings all along the top of it. This is now piped. This has been added. This is, I think, the head of an internal elevator portion. And I'm experimenting with my weathering to try to get the poured concrete look. Here's the unloading shed. Really, I just made it out of 2 different pieces of scrap material here. And once you put the roof on and you sandwich it between the building and the silo, you don't notice that you're missing this, and you don't notice that you're missing the bottom of the elevator leg. Because the roof of the building, again, is right up front, and when you look at the pictures, there's things that just kind of stand out to you. This thing whatever the heck this is. I don't know why it's this complicated, but this is pretty faithfully modeled from a prototype pic on the building itself. And I used everything but the kitchen sink on this one. You can see that there's 3D printed parts also from that same supplier. These, I think, are former lifelike, now proto Walters parts. Brass materials from the usual sources. Can anybody recognize this yellow thing? It's old.
You say Helgen
Concord.
Concord? Okay,
It's
same
a
thing.
Concord gravel plant, probably from the 60s.
Yeah, it's a cyclone separator is what that is.
Okay. I rummaged around under the bench and found it, and I said, this looks like the right dimension to me. So, the next thing I had to build was what I learned eventually was called a Moffett vent. Basically, I had to post pictures of it on my group. And when I say my group, the group on Facebook is for the podcast that I do called Crew Call. And it's got over 5,000 members on it, and it's a great brain trust of modelers and modeling knowledge. One of the reasons I maintain the group. I use it almost like a blog now, and as I'm creating things and doing work in progress, I post it on there. But I basically put a picture of it on my group and said, anybody know what this is? And I got a bunch of responses, many of them correct. And I started doing some, yes, I get some answers that were like, well, yeah, you see them on top of glass plants. Okay, that's interesting, but not really what I'm looking for. Eventually, somebody said it's a Moffett vent, which is kind of like, Kleenex for this kind of vent, it's a trade name. And I looked at some overheads that I had, and I looked at the pictures that I had taken. None of it really gave me a clue as to how I was going to build the thing. And then I found the company who makes them, and they had a video, and I must have watched that video about 10 times, and I kept stopping it and taking screenshots and whatever. And I eventually realized how they built the thing and what it was doing. And it's actually a very clever design, because basically this whole top is kind of open, and you'll see what's inside. But it's designed to just, by the shape of it, let heat out. And you can rain right into it, and it's got an internal gutter system that runs all the water away. So it's like you don't need to blow or anything. It's just like a venturi that sucks heat out of the building when you have a process that makes lots of heat. So the first thing I tried to do was try to replicate, how I was going to build the end. This is a cardboard template. As you'll see, that's not the final product, but I'm getting there. A lot of iterations on that. Kept drawing it out. I wanted to make sure I had the part that fit the building right first. Trying to figure out how my curves are going to look. Ended up shortening the height, fattening it up a little bit. And eventually settled on this particular size and cut it out of styrene. And I had to do, I originally thought if I make my internal pieces and then just curve the styrene and glue it to it, that would work, but there was no way I wasn't going to get a wavy result from it, no matter how much, because you can't put all the internal bracing you want, because that's not what it looks like. So I ended up cutting some styrene tubing down the middle on my bandsaw, very carefully, and using that as the interior form to maintain that curve. So there's two different shapes. You've got the ends, and then you've got the interior pieces. So here, these are the interior pieces, and that took a little bit of futzing to get the right shapes. And now I'm gluing those in place. And now you can see I'm starting to add the internal beads. So these are basically what keeps the rain out of the place, and the internal gutters are underneath this. So the air just kind of flows around these baffles and gets out. Really really clever design. Nothing like it on the layout, and it was definitely a focal point of this particular building for me. So I'm happy I was able to capture the look of it. The building below it, no idea what it does, but I just basically scratch-built that out of evergreen styrene. And you can see that I'm starting to color the building, match that up with a certain key blue. I had found some craft paint that I had that was perfect for it. And I started to use it and realized I was gonna need a lot more. So of course I went down to all of the craft paint suppliers like E.C. Moore, well not E.C. Moore, Michaels and Walt Internet. Turns out the color that I chose had been discontinued. So somebody said on the group, again, if you go to Home Depot with the color sample and you ask them for a sample, they'll mix it up and it's not like too much paint, so I didn't want to buy a gallon. And that's what I did, and it proved to be a perfect solution for this. So that's a good tip. The next thing I needed to do to get the site prepared properly was to get ready for paving, and there's some interesting paving that had to be done on this site because these two tracks are in the pavement for the most part. Paving needed to run all the way down here. I had to leave it out for where the silo goes, more road that goes in behind the plant. This comes down to the shipping and receiving area, so that took a bit. In fact, here's that shipping and receiving and plant area entrance. On the left here is the next thing coming up that we'll talk about. But I use styrene strip or wood strip depending upon how much I have to curve it. And here's my paving material. Pretty simple. My buddy Jim Lincoln turned me onto this way back. You just take this paint pigment and mix it with that lightweight spackle and add it gradually, because if you have to lighten it up, you're going to need gallons of this depth. You might as well throw it away. So you just keep adding and mixing and adding and mixing until you get the color you want. And it applies very nicely, smooths out very nicely. Basically, I'm able to get a pretty good surface on the first pass, and then the next day, a little bit of wet sanding with a sponge, and fill in any potholes, and you're basically done. So it's a good way to do lots of roads. If you try to get a kind of a matching area, mix up a big batch, because you'll never mix the same color twice. This is the first coat, and I use a dull pocket knife, which seems to be the best thing. It doesn't tear, to separate the road edges from the forms. The forms I just tack in place with little dots of medium CA. So here's kind of what it looks like in place. Everything painted. You can see how the pups are there, switching out some granules. That track that gets to the shipping and receiving area actually went right through the unloading shed. So there's a few things about this building. And you can see how that cyclone up here is like, right front and center. So it needed to look right. Some of these roof vents are also 3D printed parts. That's kind of the overall picture of it. So you can see where, just by adding that angle, it's not so severe that it's indefensible. And now the building fits the site and looks like how they would have built it. In reality, I talked to one of the engineers that used to switch out this consonant, there's about a 4% grade on about an 18-inch radius curve getting into this site. And he said, switching this place, especially if it was like a, raining and slick track, was a nightmare, because the box cars fully loaded with roof shingles were really heavy coming out up that grade, and the loaded granules cars going in were a bit of a trip, you know. So I didn't model. I chose not to even attempt to replicate the grade. You gotta remember, it's Pennsylvania. Everything's built on a grade in Pennsylvania. So, but grades don't scale well on a model railroad, for operations. So I chose not to replicate that aspect of it. So I got to this point and realized that I only had one section of the layout left. That was Conrail. That was just bare. And it was in this room, and it kind of spoiled the overall look of the room. And I had the magazine deadline coming up, and I thought, I can knock this off. I'm gonna make this building out of whole cloth here. I'm gonna see what I've got on hand, and I'm gonna build Dynamite Noble out of what I have. And if you're doing it as long as I have, you probably have a lot of raw material around. I have had an embarrassing amount of old Walters kits and what have you spread out all over the floor, and looking at things, and not that. Eventually I ran across some brick siding material. I think it was Walters brick siding material that I decided I was going to use for a lot of it. I wanted to make an entry vestibule for the entrance of Dynamite. It's basically a plastics plant. So these are pipe stuff modules that I kind of cobbled together here, trying to figure out what will work. And I wanted just to give it a little more interest, I inset the entrance a little bit, let me see. So now I'm starting to do the usual, well, bend it like Beckham, right? If it needs to fit in place and look right. It worked well at certain peaks, so I applied the same techniques here. So this is the Walters brick material. It was two different colors, but I didn't care because I was going to paint it. And I'm laying it out on styrene to get a feel for the whole layout and footprint. I'm playing with stuff back here that I ended up not doing in order to get the shipping and receiving right. But this is, all these multiple iterations enable you to let the thing evolve. So there's one side, styrene strip to represent the concrete foundation. Don't know whose doors these are, maybe pipe stuff. And I decided to use, I think this is probably pipe stuff, siding material, to do the shipping dock, shipping and receiving dock. So that kind of fits around the back of the building. I wanted to do a tinted glazing for the entry vestibule. This picture doesn't do it justice in person. It actually looks pretty good. I didn't want to model an office interior, and if I had used clear, you would have seen right through it. Somebody suggested using film negative leader. I thought, film negatives, I remember those. Crawling through all kinds of drawers and eventually found some, because you go from print to slides to digital. So how long have I had that stuff? Long time. But it was the perfect thing for what I was trying to get at. The shipping and receiving wraparound portion is now painted and in place, and I'm playing with silos here. But again, you can see the footprint of what I needed to complete here. And I didn't want all the silos to look identical, because on the prototype, they had highs and lows on the sidings and different things on top. So I used a little artistic license on these. I could have done all of this stuff in brass, but it would have been difficult to do the curved portion. So I used a lot of the plastic railings that come with the Walters silos. And once they're painted up, they don't look too bad, actually. There's different pastel colors that are often used on these silos. Very often they're white, sometimes they're light blue. I didn't want light blue because it would have just, I think, blended right into my sky, so I chose this particular green. And there's the main office now in place. I pulled some logos off the internet to make the signs. Those are probably Rapido vehicles there. And that's what the whole 9x9 room that we started out with now looks like. The vacuum's not there anymore. But it's all operational. You can see the CertainTeed logos are in place on the tank and on the silo. That was just kind of cut off of the internet. Pictures that I took of the tank, I used some software to de-skew it, and then I printed it, and then I just glued it right on the tank, and a little bit of weathering, and it blended right in. You can see all the paving that's involved there. I believe since this photo was taken, I've got some greenery now in back here. You don't really see it much. This is not your typical view. I think I have to hold the camera up kind of high to capture this, but it's really the only way to represent the whole project. But basically, I was able to complete it in time, probably within a couple weeks of the article deadline. And then it was time to start taking some photos for the article. And that took about 3 weeks. The article was the first time I had done focus stacking, but it's really the only way you can get the right depth of field for magazine quality presentations. And I think I ended up taking over 900 exposures, which is a lot. But each picture uses 9 exposures, you know, so it's a big layout, as you saw in the track plan earlier. So I haven't even seen the magazine yet. You might be waiting for me when I get home. Of course, I've seen the PDF of it. Of course, the track plan was really my motivation for kind of committing to this effort. It's a lot of work to do these kinds of articles, but I think Otto did a masterful job on the track plan. I can't commend his work enough. RMC had a short production window for this, just the way the schedule fell. So they only had 3 weeks really to put this together. So on the weekend before they went to press on Monday, he and I were going back and forth with revisions to the track plan. And on the Sunday night, we went through 7 iterations, and he would send me a drawing. I'd look at it and say, nope, this, and this needs to change. So he would then send me a copy with those areas gone. I would hand draw in the corrections, scan it, send it to him. He would then, this is all happening in real time, right? You know, over a couple of hours. And we just keep going back and forth like that. But I was very impressed with his commitment to getting it right. And I'm tremendously pleased with the track plan, I have to admit. So hopefully the article will look good and be a tribute to Conrail's 50th anniversary. Railroad Beach, a lot of us love here. This is just some boilerplate information about my podcast, my website, my YouTube channel, if anybody wants to see me drilling holes. That's the only thing on the channel, of course. There's a lot of things on here. My Getting Real column is something I do a couple times a year for my railroad hobbyists. It's in the paid section, but it's cheap. It's worth it. So that's what I got, folks. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
That looks great. You mentioned that you made so the roof was removable on Foster Wheeler.
Yes.
How has that worked out, like from an operations perspective? Has that presented issues like spotting cars in that building and so forth?
Not yet.
Okay.
So Foster Wheeler made, for the most part, big pressure vessels. And I think Danielton made me a custom pressure vessel that fits on an F-38 flat car that I have, and I've got a little 45 tonner. So we've only had one op session where we used it. Basically the 45 tonner brings it out, sets it out on the pickup truck. So there's not a lot of action inside the building, but it's nice to know if I need to take the off, I can. I did that with my roundhouse too, because it's also a helping place with magnets. You never know. You know, if you're gonna run power in and out of something, sometimes you have to clean the track, and there are track cleaning cars, but you just never know what's gonna happen. So the roof comes off very easily, which is nice, and there hasn't been any warpage or twisting. So that's good.
Think of all that storage space you've got in there now too.
You could put things in. I did that with the roundhouse, because there's a back shop off the back of the roundhouse, and I thought, you know what, I can stick power in there if I need to. Any other questions?